promises to be a treasure trove of information which we can all use to better equip ourselves and ensure that we can properly and efficiently service our clients in a manner that they have been accustomed to. So in this period, we have now come to know as the new normal. So if you remember, the overriding theme of this webinar is to help the insurance industry operate under the circumstances prevalent under the new normal. And in the discussions that followed, quite a few mentioned that one of the areas that needed work was on payments, collections, in short, the financial management side. So we are very fortunate to have the experts enlighten us on the new trends, and we'll leave it to Francis to properly introduce our VIP guests in a while. So Francis, this promises to be a long session, so without further ado, let me pass it on to you.
Thank you, Mitch. Hi everyone. Welcome to the 5th serving of the insurance industry webinar. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate CPI for being able to invite such exceptional speakers for the past month and a half. So thank you, CPI. This afternoon will be no different, because today we have 2 banking and finance experts who will be shedding light to our topic on next generation banking. But before I introduce these gentlemen, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. He will be giving us some opening remarks. He is none other than Mr. Eugene Acevedo, the President and Chief Executive Officer of RCBC. Mr. Acevedo, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Coming in loud and clear.
Very good. This is my 7th or 8th session, and I'm starting to enjoy these webinars. It's, they're still quite unnerving, just like real time or public speeches. But at least now I don't have to dress completely. So if you guys are guessing whether I'm wearing shorts or not, I am. I start by greeting all our banker friends, our friends from the insurance industry, and our tech friends. I saw some names in the list. Good afternoon, and thank you to CPI for inviting us. We couldn't say no to them. But this topic is something that's very close to our hearts. It's something that we experienced just over the last, intensely over the last 3 months, but it feels like we've known this for so long. I'll start by sharing with you how we went through it ourselves. In January, when we started hearing about COVID, the first instinct that came to mind was, let's check what happened to SARS in 2002. It started November, December, and by July 2003, things were back to normal. There were only about 8,000 people infected. So there was reason for people to be optimistic about our chances. So we started planning with that scenario in mind until the numbers started piling up and up and up. And we changed our frame of reference. Suddenly, we changed our reference to 1918, the Spanish flu. We even read what happened in the Philippines during that time. There were 3 waves over, I think, 6 or 7 months. And then we also studied how this could possibly end. And the consensus was, this crisis is probably going to end when we find a vaccine. So we studied all possibilities. We researched, and the most optimistic estimate is 18 months from now. Realizing that we still don't have a successful vaccine for HIV, for dengue, and in fact, SARS and the other one, MERS, never had successful vaccines made. So this is actually going to be the first time that we are trying to be successful in creating a corona vaccine for human beings. So what does that do to me as a CEO? What does it do for businessmen? Suddenly we are forced to think long term. Second, we look at what our customers are doing and what everybody is doing, and we realize that fear has become the most powerful motivator. Fear has changed people's behavior quickly. And the question was and is whether fear will change people's behavior permanently. What has changed so far? I have 486 branches. At some point, I was running less than half of them. Branch visits have dropped to at least half, in some places to only 10% the original volume. I'm sharing you information that is happening to banks, but I assure you, similar things are happening to the other businesses. Second important change was that digital enrollments grew by a lot and digital payments multiplied. My two colleagues are going to give you the data later. Number three, based on our credit card data, we've seen consumption patterns change drastically. For example, credit card payments for airline, hotel, Airbnb, those have dried up. E-commerce purchases, on the other hand, for food, for example, have skyrocketed. And Netflix has become an overnight winner. Suddenly, from an ignoramus CEO, now I'm a huge fan and probably even an expert on Son Ye-jin, Song Hye-kyo, and Jun Ji-hyun, the three best Korean actresses. Moving on to more serious things. Number four, we realized that we did not have to travel to meet people, saving time and fuel. We use Zoom, WebEx, Facebook Messenger, like what some people are doing now, and we learned to manage by Viber, which I do the whole time. Imagine if Viber were not in existence, I don't think I'd be able to manage RCBC as well as I could do now. Board meetings are now digital. Number five, and probably this is one of the more serious things, demand has dropped and our customers, our corporate customers specifically, have suffered. Their employees have suffered. We are going to see, or are probably seeing, the start of the worst credit crisis in our careers. About half of our consumer borrowers are OFW. More than 2 million, if we check the numbers of the Department of Labor, over 2 million domestic employees are out of work. So the world has changed, and to survive, we need to change with it. We need to transform fast. Let me share with you the 5 things we are doing as bankers, and you might probably have something similar for your industry. First, and this is universal, our first priority is always personal safety. And I stress, personal safety over livelihoods. Number 2, we engaged our customers, starting with those who were severely hit by COVID, especially those who we think will suffer slowly, will recover slowly. The way we're doing this is we are basically calling them, telling them, if you need more time for your loan payments, we will just extend it automatically. But I want them to start thinking about their prospects for the next year or 2 years. It is time to be realistic. I think one of the problems we saw was that people remained optimistic about their chances. They have to plan more conservatively, and we are there. We will be there to help them out. I keep stressing that a good businessman hit by COVID is still a good businessman. He just needs our help to tide him over, but he will have to think about how he can and should transform his business to adjust the changing behavior of customers. Number 3, since we were facing we were anticipating a huge credit crisis, we converted hundreds of our bankers into collection agents. We retrained over 200 RCBC bankers to be ready for collections. Number 4, we decided to reprioritize our products. Instead of selling traditional products, almost all of our relationship managers are selling digital products, enabling people to open accounts digitally, migrate customers from traditional over-the-counter into mobile platforms. Corporate clients who were preparing checks, we are now convincing them to do electronic funds transfers. We made it free so that the only reason to say no would be inconvenience or whatever else. We even now encourage online investments. If you want to do UITF or trust fund investments, you don't need to see a banker, you don't need to go to a branch, you just log on to RCBC online. But number 5, which is probably the most important thing, is that we are cutting our costs radically. These are going to be really bad times and we need to cut costs. So capital expenditures are cut by large fractions. Operating expenses are cut 10 to 20%. But thankfully, we went through a process starting 2 years ago, that's helping us. I'm referring to our digital transformation exercise. The idea was, and the principle is, we are using digitization primarily to create a more delightful customer experience. And I think everybody wants to do that. However, the nice side benefit is that by doing so, we are able to cut costs significantly. What I did not anticipate was there was a third benefit. The third benefit is we create a safe environment for both employees and customers. Unanticipated, but extremely welcome. So if you ask me what anyone needs to do now, my simple answer would be, if you haven't done it yet, initiate a digital transformation exercise right away. Thank you, and I shall pass on the mic to my colleagues, but meantime, please allow me to greet you or to say thank you to the organizers, and please stay safe, everyone, and have a great afternoon. Thanks so much for inviting RCBC to be part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you
Acevedo.
also, Mr. Acevedo.
Thank you. We have not started the actual webinar, but we've already gotten so much from Mr. Acevedo. Makes me worry a little bit from the things he said, but it's also very encouraging that we have people like them and our 2 speakers this afternoon who will be helping us go through this COVID-19 pandemic. Anyway, I will proceed.
Francis.
Yeah, Mitch.
Francis, before I introduce our 2 speakers, you might want to take a look at your screen. The poll results are out, and this might be interesting to our next 2 speakers.
Okay. We have poll questions, and the first one is, what is your business's primary means of collection from your customer? And the top notcher is through bank deposit, which is 31%. And then the next one is by check, which is 26%. And the third one is cash, 24%. Online payments is the last at 19%. Okay. So
we still have a long way to go, huh?
Yeah, yes. Okay. The other poll question is, what is your business's primary means of payment to your vendors, partners, and employees? The top notcher is by a check. So that's 38% of our listeners. Anyway, so with that in mind, I'd like to proceed now to introduce our first speaker. Okay. Our first speaker is the Executive Vice President and Group Head of Global Transaction Banking of RCBC. Prior to RCBC, he was Group Head for Transaction Banking at BDO Unibank. And prior to that, he was also Head of Business Banking Division in Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. Manny was my classmate in Ateneo de Manila. We are both an AB Economics graduate, but Manny is different. He's from the AB Economics Honors Program, and I'm from
Nobody's perfect, Francis.
So, but anyway,
Nerd.
he's Manny Narciso is a great pianist and guitarist and a good friend of mine. Sorry, Manny, I have to say that. So, hi, Manny, welcome.
Just don't ask me to sing, Francis, okay?
You used to sing. Come on, Manny.
Different life.
So welcome,
Okay.
Manny.
Very
Glad
happy
can-
to be here, Francis.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So yeah, I'll introduce his colleague already. Also, the other speaker for this afternoon is Mr. Lito Villanueva. Lito is a digital transformation expert and has over 20 years experience in banking. He has 2 graduate degrees, one in public administration with magna cum laude honors and a master's degree in national security administration. He's also one of the founding executives of Voyager Innovations, the company who started PayMaya. He's also cited as one of Asia's 100 fintech leaders, the first and only Filipino who is part of that list. And Mr. Lito Villanueva's accolades go on, and we will lose all our time if I enumerate everything. So Manny, I guess we can start with your segment.
Sure, happy to start, okay. Shall I begin now?
Yes, please do.
All right, very good. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be here and to be part of this. I hope you can, please let me know if you can see the screen. Okay,
Yep.
All right, okay, very good. I'm calling this financial management in the strange new normal. Normal is good, okay, that's fine. I can accept that this will be normal, but it is by no means familiar. It's all very strange to many of us, especially in the business world. And so that's what I'm calling this today. Just some context, I'm doing this from the perspective of financial managers of corporations, because that's what the organizers asked me to do. So I hope that you get a flavor for how all these changes will affect, in particular, those that manage the finances of companies, especially financial services companies. I'm starting off with a picture, and no, that is not a checkpoint for the Highway Patrol Group. That is the Skyway. Why am I showing you this? Well, if you'll notice, you've got 8 lanes in that toll gate, and 5 of them are asking for exact toll. 5 out of 8. And despite the fact that there are 5 of them, they're filled up. I mean, there's only 1 lane for cash, and it's almost as long as all 5 put together. And what does that tell you? 2 things. 1, nobody likes change. And the second thing is change slows us down. All right, I just want you to remember that through a picture. Okay, so moving on from this, now let's talk about our strange new normal. First and foremost, is this really totally unfamiliar to us? I ask this question because, in my opinion, I think one of the changes that's going on really is not unfamiliar. And I would rather break this down into an old change that's being accelerated by new changes. All right, so 1 old change and 2 new changes. And the old change is digital adaptation. And you might wonder, is that really old? That sounds very new to me, but let me explain to you why it is. Now, the other 2 are better EFT services, and EFT is electronic funds transfer. And third is our favorite, the COVID-19 pandemic. All right, so we're talking about these 3 changes, and we'll get to that as we go along. But let's ask a question first about them. And that would be, are these a threat or opportunity for us? My boss, Eugene, has already mentioned that we've seen some opportunities, but we've also seen that there will be threats to the financial services industry. A lot depends on how we react, how we adapt, and how we grow. Okay, but let's first understand how we got here. I'd like to talk a little about that. And how we got here, it would help to understand a little more about these 3 changes. So let's go right off into trying to understand digital adaptation, which I called, by the way, an old change, right? So the old change, digital adaptation. Why do I call this an old change? First of all, let me tell you, it's really old as a Nokia 5110. On the upper left-hand side of your screen, and a Toshiba satellite on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Okay, I'm sure all of us at one point in time had a Nokia 5110. If you were, more upscale, you probably had a 6110. Okay, and all you could do with it really was what? You could call, you could text, you could play Snake, and you could, use it as a calculator, even though you already had a calculator, right? So that's what it was good for, nothing else. And on the lower right-hand side of the screen, the Toshiba Tecra or the Toshiba satellite, sure, it had computing power, but it was tough to carry it around. It was heavy. I forget how many pounds, but it was a hassle to bring that with you, right? So you had mobile connectivity, one device, computing power, another. Then things started to change. About the time Keanu Reeves came out of the Matrix with his famous flip phone, the Nokia 7110 came out, and what it had was Nokia added data access, wireless data access to this phone. So you actually could do the internet, but the screen was small. There was no color, but you could do it. The point was you could do it. So it was something was starting. On the other side, you had miniaturization kicking in. So the HP Jornada, which you see on that side, was about the size, I would say, of half a keyboard. And that was pretty good, except if you wanted to connect to your email, then you'd have to plug into the back of that a telephone cable so that the modem could kick in. And so you were limited by being tied to the wall, literally, by a telephone cable. Okay, so not much mobility there yet. Okay, then Ericsson, and I had one of these phones, said, I'm going for a bigger screen, and I'm going for, since Windows is doing GUIs, I'm gonna go for a graphical user interface. And that's what they did. So you see the screen growing here, and they move towards a Windows type interface. Whereas on the other side, you see the Palm Pilot. So miniaturization is still going on, but it's still tied to something. You have to put it in the dock to synchronize your email and your contacts with your PC. All right, so we're not yet there. Then suddenly we see, okay, Nokia Communicator 9000 comes out. It's got a much bigger screen and a full keyboard. And Palm has the Palm 7, which at last has mobile data going for it. So you can carry it around with you and still be connected to the internet, to your email. At this point, it's interesting because what you see happening here is you've got the DNA of a computer, but looking like a phone, and the DNA of a phone, but looking like a laptop. And at that point, you knew for sure what would happen is these would converge. The form factors would come together. Everyone would say, I want a full-blown keyboard, a color screen. I want apps. I want to carry it around, and I want data access. And so we had these two devices come out, the Nokia 9500 communicator and the Palm Tungsten. All right. It didn't end there, though. These two, before they evolved into what we all have today in our pockets, went to the BlackBerry phase, which my boss still loves up to today. Right, Eugene? You wonder why it's an iPod Touch there when it's a music playing device. Well, because that was the very first device Apple came out that had a touch screen. It was not the iPhone. And so this influenced everything. So by the time the iPhone came out, it was the standard interface. As now today, what you've got is a variety of tablets and mobiles, etc. Smartphones they're now called, with only two consolidations of operating systems, iOS for Apple and Android by Google. And you've got apps which you can buy off the store. And the whole time this was happening, you've had increases in connectivity, bandwidth, capabilities because of the apps, storage increased, speed was much better, and computing power was there, all right? So what we have today, what digital means to us is we look around and we see everyone is carrying a computer in their pockets. Everyone, almost everyone. And it's always on. I mean, who turns off their mobile phone at night? I keep mine on the side of my bed, but it's on the whole night, okay? You're never without it. I mean, who of us would leave home, be 2 or 3 kilometers away, realize that we left our phone there and not go back and get it, okay? So it's always with us, it's always on. It keeps us constantly connected to services, to servers that are available 24/7, anytime, anywhere. And it's accessed X times a day and used Y hours a day. What are X and Y? X is actually about 320. That's the latest. So if you do the math, if you have 16 waking hours and you divide 320 into 16, you're using it 20 times an hour. And if you do the math further, that's once every 3 minutes. Now, is that strange? Do you not use it once every 3 minutes? The only reason I'm not using it is I'm giving this webinar. If not, I'd probably be on it right now. Why hours a day? Why is 8 hours a day? Okay, so that's what you have in front of you. And when I say everyone, we're talking about your clients. We're talking about your employees. We're talking about your business partners. So you might want to ask yourself, how are you digitally engaging them? Do you have an idea? Have you carried that further into a strategy to do that? Are you executing that strategy? As you do that, you will generate data. How are you using the data that you are generating? And lastly, how is it all that making a difference in the way you conduct your affairs? Because you don't do digital for the sake of digital. It has to make a difference in what you're doing, a significant difference for the better. All right, so that's what digital really means when we talk about it from a business standpoint, and we try to understand what should we zero in on when we're doing a transformation. Okay, that old change. Now, new change number one that accelerated that old change: better EFT services, better electronic funds transfer services. You might wonder, why is that so important? And then you realize that for money to be invested, for money to be used to purchase something, you've got to move the money to the point of delivery. And you can't move that money unless in the past you had cash or checks. And cash was, it was a bummer to move around. I used to work in Vietnam, and there was a time when cash was the only acceptable form of exchange because they didn't have checks. And you had San Miguel operating in a province called Binh Duong, outside of Ho Chi Minh. And someone would go there to pick up livestock. And in the truck that they picked the livestock up in, you had it stuck with cash, with dong bills, no? Just to be able to do that. No? That's why Vietnam, when they moved to EFT, when I went there working for HSBC in 2008, everyone embraced it instantly. There were no checks anyway. So they said, we're done with cash, we're moving on. Okay, it was a long time coming in the Philippines, but now we have two platforms, InstaPay and PesoNet. And what they do for us is that, I say better because all banks who participate are bound by rules and they follow them to the letter. What are these rules? The ones that matter are: one, same day value. So these are credited to you the same day. If I choose to pay Francis today by sending an EFT over InstaPay, he gets it instantly. Two, the funds get in there without deductions. The bank has to give Francis everything that I wanted him to pay. Sure, my bank will charge me, but his bank will not charge him. And we're talking my bank to his bank, which are two different banks. We never had this in the past. So many countries already did. And now that we do, that makes it so much easier for us to be able to conduct all our financial business. No? There are some differences between the two. I've outlined them here. All you have to know is that InstaPay is instant, PesoNet gets credit end of day, and InstaPay has a 50,000 peso limit. So InstaPay, PesoNet is the choice for business to business. All right. You can't access them directly, okay? You've got to go through a bank who connects to BancNet or to the Philippine Clearinghouse Corporation, and the transfers are effected, okay? All right, so that's new change number one. Our favorite, new change number two, the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, this is now our strange new normal. And we may be on GCQ next week. That's a possibility, but when we are, all right, we will still have to use protective gear when we go out. Public facilities will have been redesigned. Even private offices will have been redesigned. Commuting will be a hassle. Going to restaurants, you have to wait, you have to fall in line. I heard that the MRT had said that when we return to operation, please be there 3 hours before boarding. That sounds a lot like an airport, doesn't it? 3 hours before, okay? And we have to minimize physical interaction. And when this was all beginning, all of us were at home trying to work, to play, to shop, to socialize. We're happy that you were trying to bank from home because that was a possibility. But when we go back out there, it'll be inconvenient just to try to live your life again. All right? And that is going to further push digital. I have to put this out there because you have to understand that even though lockdown goes away, when we live differently, people will rather not go out if they don't have to. Why? Because of all of this. They would rather not. And if they don't have to, then that would be actually the better thing for them. If you as a business give them options for not having to go out there, inconvenience themselves or expose themselves, then you have an upper hand, all right? And I would say that financial services companies have a bit of an edge here. Why? Because we don't have to worry about logistics. If we look at what's happening here, digital and logistics have gone up big time during this crisis because people don't want to go out, but they choose to conduct their affairs digitally. But if you order a, say, pepperoni cream pizza from SNR, there's still the delivery end. Us in financial services, we don't have to worry about that. All we have to do is get the funds to us, and we can do what we want with it. We can, we can invest it in wherever the customer says we should. We can transfer funds one account to another. So the delivery of the final product is all electronically done, and we don't have to worry about bringing the pizza. Okay, so we, of all people, should be adapting. Now, the impact, therefore, is here we are. We see acceleration of digital adaptation, okay? We see our customers behaving differently. We need to adapt accordingly because how we engage our employees, business partners, and customers should change with this. And we should be among the quickest to adapt. Why are we not doing so? And we talked about this at the start when I first met with Carl, Ito, and Shell. Well, there are barriers, and among many of them are worried about things like, one, is it safe? And this goes particularly for the financial management function because it has to be a very secure part of the company. Is it unfamiliar and challenging? I already mentioned that it's an old change. And many of you who are in corporates have probably been paying your taxes to something called EFPS for a long time now. So you've been doing this, electronic payments. You've been doing it already. We're just carrying it a step further. Is it challenging? All right. I'll go to the next question. If I want to adapt, who will help me? So if it's challenging, some will find it challenging, some will not. There are those who can help you. Okay. And I'll share with you 4 business cards later of people who can. All right. I'd like to answer these questions though with just one question. Answer a question with a question. That's, have other businesses adapted successfully in this time of COVID-19? And rather than go into all the cases and all the statistics about that, I'll just show you one. And that is PesoNet outward transfer volume from March to April, which is the period of the lockdown. As I told you earlier, PesoNet is the favored business-to-business, real-time, same-day value peso payment system. And if you look at what went on here, our volume for this grew 175% from March to April, pushing us from number 10 to number 7, okay? It grew very strongly with other banks as well. These are the top 10 for PesoNet. Why did it grow so strong for us? Because we had seen that the potential of PesoNet as a supplier, for example, a supplier payment system or a payroll delivery, salary delivery system, was huge. And so second half of last year, we had already started offering this to corporations and asking them if you need to adapt to this, if you think this is a good idea, we're very happy to go in there and set it up for you. And suddenly, come March, they said, hey, you know what you were telling us about that? We weren't ready then, but we're ready now. So we suddenly saw a jump from 4.4 billion pesos, okay, this is thousands, to 12.3 billion pesos. And for the first 2 weeks of May, that growth continued. And we went moved from number 7 to number 6. So we see these companies adapting. We take a look at who they're paying, and we see it's regular recipients of their payments. We see it's suppliers. So we see that they have changed. Eugene was asking earlier, is this going to be a permanent change? If you think that you can do things this conveniently, and it's a regular part of your daily business, then why would you move back to the old way when all this passes? Okay, so last thing I'd like to do is take you through the possibilities for you as financial services companies. And let's start by looking at how you traditionally used to manage funds. You started with your company and you said, I have to manage funds, I have to make payments, and I have to collect receivables. Okay, to do that, I need to have a set of accounts. So there they are. I open a set of accounts with one bank. And traditionally, I would operate these accounts by signing on documents, where these are checks, funds transfer forms, etc., etc. Okay, so I'm all set to go. I pay my employees by cash or checks. I pay my suppliers through checks mostly. We saw that earlier in the poll. I have customers coming to bring me check payments for what I'm selling. Okay, I collect these checks. I bring them to the branch, or I tell my customers, please bring your check to this branch, deposit it to my account, and send me a copy of the deposit slip. Typical, all right? Last thing is, of course, I have customers who bring cash. And I take that, I deposit that in the bank, or I call the bank to bring an armored car and pick it up. So what you see about this, one, a lot of paper going around. Two, a lot of people to interact with. That includes the armored car operators. That includes the roving teller and the security guards, right? And so you see yourself now asking people to come out physically and work with you at a time when, as we said earlier, because of all the friction caused by the new, as a strange new normal, they'd rather not do that. So what do? What are your options? Okay, let's now move to a semi-electronic funds management setup. And what we'll do first is I'll take you out of here, right? I'll put a computer in front of you because you've got to have access to an e-banking system. And then I'll replace documents and I'll replace signatures with something called workflow. And what is workflow? Let me get to that, okay? This answers the question, is it safe? Now, many of you bank online already. If you're doing that, then you are the the only operator of your account. If a hacker gets your identity and manages to get in there, then he can make all the decisions regarding what to do with your funds. That's individual, because a single individual affects transactions within limits set by the bank. Now, on the corporate side, however, you've got several people needed to be involved for something to happen, for a transaction to happen. And that's called workflow, all right? Makers, reviewers, authorizers, signatories, approvers, whatever you want to call them. And there is an electronic version of that, which renders it very safe. Because if you're a cyber criminal and you really would like to break into a corporation and do an authorized transaction, you would have to get the IDs stolen, steal identities of all these people, not just one person, okay? So that in itself is a huge deterrent for cybercrime directed at corporate transactions, something we've not yet seen in fact, okay? Let's see how that would work. So here I am, I want to approve this transaction. If it's a funds transfer, I need to see that people have worked on it and it's properly signed. What's the equivalent on e-banking? Well, let's take a look at that. First of all, I would have several people involved in this. And I would have to make sure they are authorized to do that. So every banking system has very strong access controls. Now let's start with creation of a transaction. The makers would do the equivalent of preparing the checks, except they do it in front of the computer screen electronically. Access control would validate their identity and make sure they have the rights or the privileges to create a transaction. If so, then it's created, but not yet, of course, authorized. So nothing happens yet. Next thing is the system automatically tells the next people in line, I have a transaction pending for you, which you have to work on, or else it cannot be processed. So these people now sign on. Their identity is validated. And if their privileges are appropriate, then their mark is included in the transaction. This now moves on to the last person. He gets his notification by email or by SMS automatically. The bank sends that to him. So he sees, oh, my approval is needed. So he logs on, electronically indicates his approval, and now this is good to go. And now that it's good to go, you have the electronic equivalent of a paper transaction that's been fully authorized, right? And once that's done, it will continue. Okay, so now you've got workflow and everything you need to operate your accounts electronically. So let's begin. Let's get rid of payroll through cash and checks and transfer that now to employees' bank accounts. And note here also to e-wallets. That's possible too, right? PayMaya, GCash, etc. Why is that interesting? Because there are some individuals you probably want to pay not through an account, but through a prepaid card or a debit card, okay? So that's possible when you do this, right? You can do an account-to-account transfer to online banking, or you can credit other banks. Your employees don't have to have the account in the same bank as you anymore, as your company. They can be in any bank and you can still move funds to them. For suppliers, it's the same thing. So now we start paying them through PesoNet, which is the preferred B2B. And these are supplier accounts at any bank. Banks used to tell you, all your suppliers used to have to have your account in the same bank as you. No longer the case. You cannot do that through PesoNet. Okay. Now we take a look at your customers paying by check, and they're still doing that because you might not be able to get people off checks right away. But what you can do is, instead of bringing these to the bank for deposit, you can scan them and send the images to your bank. And your bank can deposit those checks by virtue of the images received after validating them. So again, no need for you to go to the bank to deposit the checks, all right? As for customers paying cash, what we can do is, many of our corporate clients are asking us for this machine now. It's called a remote deposit machine or a cash acceptance machine, where you put cash in the machine, it validates all the cash very, very speedily. It's a very fast scanner, and then transmits to us how much cash it received from you. If it says, I just got 2 million pesos put into the machine, then what we would do is credit your account immediately. Okay? So your account gets credited for cash that's still on site. And what does that do? Well, for one thing, you don't have any trips to the bank to deposit cash. And if you're using an armored car, it just comes to the machine and pick it up every now and then. Okay? But we still got people here. We still have interaction. Let's get rid of that for once and for all. Because like I said, we see more and more people willing or not willing to go out there and do all these things with the conditions of GCQ in place. So what we'll do now is we'll give clients the option to pay fully electronically. First, through client-initiated payments. Now, what would that look like? All right. That means that your clients would log on to their e-banking system, right? And this is it. They would have an option to transfer funds by Instant Pay or PesoNet by putting in your account number and the beneficiary name, which is you, and key in maybe their policy number in the purpose and remarks. And you would receive that, okay? If it was Instant Pay real time, PesoNet end of day. So this is his e-banking system, no matter what bank, and you're receiving it electronically without having to worry about interacting, okay? Same thing if you enroll as an online bills payment merchant in e-banking portals. What that looks like is, again, this is your client's e-banking system. You're enrolled as one of the possible recipients of bills payments through the e-banking system. He chooses your company, makes the payment, and you get information on his policy number, his name, etc., etc.
Manny,
Okay.
we're losing your slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The last one is payment at your website, where what you can do is, if you already have a company website, what we could do is we could put your payment gateway in there so that companies can log on to your site and choose to pay by their credit card or their debit card. So now these give your clients options to pay you without ever having to set foot in a branch or at your offices. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to conclude this discussion. Just to summarize, we know that many digital applications have been around for a long time, and they've proven secure and effective. Nothing new, but they've been accelerated because of two factors. First is the launch of better EFT services, InstaPay and PesoNet, which have made peso-to-peso payments between banks more reliable and standardized. So consumers and corporations alike are taking to that. Then the COVID-19 pandemic has made it even more imperative for people who want to move funds to do so from the comfort of their homes or their offices, and made it more urgent for you to adapt digitally as businesses. Now, we as banks, admittedly, we benefit likewise from this, from the digital migration, because in doing so, there's less traffic to the branches, there's less paper to process, everything becomes more efficient. And so we'd be very happy to help you make the transition as needed, if you're interested. And if you are, get ready to do a screenshot, because what I'm putting up next is people who can help you with this if you're interested. Me and my colleagues, my team would be very happy to see how we can help you. If you think that you're ready to do this, we've done this with many customers in the past, and we'd be happy to do it again and again. All right, I think that pretty much concludes my discussion. I hope I covered what the organizer had wanted me to talk about. So at this point, I'll turn over to Francis, and so he can introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, you nailed it, Manny. That's exactly what we were thinking of hearing from you. And there's one very interesting question though that came in. It's from Alvin, and the question is: could you comment on what happens if their staff commits an error, for example, in typing in the wrong digits on a PesoNet system, for example? What happens if they make a mistake?
All right. If what you mean by wrong digits is the account number,
probably
the transaction will not proceed. In the case of InstaPay, that would be instant, because InstaPay is real time. So when you send it over, the bank on the other end will validate that instantly. And if it's not there, you'll get an error. Okay. Okay. Now, if you made a mistake in the number and the amount, and your account's funded, that's gonna happen. And I think your recipient will be very happy. It will probably call you and say, "Hey, thanks." Okay, so that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So if it's PesoNet though, that will be invalidated end of day because it's a batch transaction. So that will get back. You get notice about that later on. But yeah, it's the same. I mean, that's what would happen.
Okay, Manny, I've got a couple of questions here as well. There's one: with the increase in EFTs and electronic banking, how do we persuade and win the unbanked market from going to remittance centers?
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna leave that to Lito, because Lito is our Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer, and that's right up his area of expertise. So
okay, one more question. Do you still need the same documents, for example, board resolutions, KYC, etc., to shift from a traditional system to an online system, even if those documents have already been previously submitted to the bank?
Okay. There is a separate set of agreements for electronic, which do have to be signed and board approved. So the answer is there would have to be a new set of documents. So that's one. So those have to be signed. However, in terms of the arrangements, like you probably already have a board resolution that says that, oh, I have signatory A, signatory B, them together this amount. That arrangement can be duplicated or imitated exactly within the electronic system. Okay, so you don't have to change the arrangements. Those can be copied and followed to the letter. But you do have to send a new set of agreements that the board has to approve.
Okay. Okay, Manny, thanks. There are a couple of questions that we could probably combine, but here it goes. Everybody has gone digital overnight since COVID. How safe is it? I read an article from a security expert that our Philippine bank firewalls, as compared to first world banks, are are not as guarded. Just
Really?
curious for an answer straight from a banker.
Okay. We had a cybersecurity expert give a talk to the officers, senior officers, executives, and the board members of all the companies inside of the Yuchenko Group conglomerate. No? And I recall this was about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. And he admittedly, there are banks. I mean, if you look at all the Philippine banks, no, they're in varying stages of cybercrime prevention or setting up their cybersecurity measures. And he showed a curve with no banks mentioned, no names mentioned, of where these banks were. And interestingly, there were 3 or 4 at the upper end of the curve, which means they had put in place measures, countermeasures that were world-class. No? So I wouldn't generalize and say that Philippine banks are behind. I wouldn't do that. I would say that maybe they're not all on the same footing, but definitely those that take cybersecurity and digital very seriously, I think, have put the measures in place to protect them and their clients.
Thank you. Kicks?
Well, yeah, thanks, Mitch. I actually have another question and a comment actually that I think, well, Mr. Acevedo is back with us. He mentioned something about the fear factor actually will actually push now people to go more into electronic banking. And as Manny was mentioning a while ago, the scenario is it looks like everybody is capable of doing e-banking now. And it's just a matter of trusting the system more. Because I think I mentioned to Manny earlier that there's some fear also in getting into this new system because to them, they have not yet tested it, no? But I think Manny has assured us about the security measures and things about data being corrupted, for example, is unfounded fear actually. So, right, Manny?
Yeah, we had talked about this earlier, and ever since cyclic redundancy checks were put in place more than a decade ago, the technology on improving the reliability of data has really improved. No? So I guess it's safe to say, Francis, that that's one of the problems of the past that pretty much the new technology has solved. No? So it's not something I would worry too much about.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, maybe we can already let Mr. Villanueva in.
Hi, yes.
Hi. So, well, I'd like to thank Manny for the very interesting speech on e-banking. And
Thanks. I hope you found it useful.
Yes. So, Manny, you'll stay with us, right?
Of course. Yeah. Sure.
So, I'd like now to ask Lito, our digital transformation expert, to start sharing his screen, which he's doing right now.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, take over, Lito.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank the Philippine Insurers and Reinsurers Association, the Insurance Institute for Asia and the Pacific, and the Computer Professionals Incorporated for having me in today's webinar. So of course, next I would like to acknowledge the presence of my good friend and colleague Manny Narciso, and of course our President and CEO Eugene Acevedo. Of course, to everyone joining us today, thank you for taking the time. So let's get right into it. Next slide, please. So first things first, what I want everyone to understand is that digital future is today and that the new normal is now. So if we would like to discuss moving one's financial management towards a digital future, then we are talking about someone's who's been left behind by the times. The COVID-19 pandemic abruptly ushered in a new era. I'm sure you have noticed that nothing is as it was a few months before. Physical interaction is limited, unessential travel is outlawed, transactions are controlled, and little change is expected in the short term. Next slide. To survive in this new normal, one needs a high digital quotient. What does this mean? This is the sum total of a person's or a company's abilities that enable them to adapt to the demands and challenges of the digital today. This skill set include: one, strategy. Are there goals put in place? Two, culture. Do you have the right mindset for this? Three, organization. How about your structure and policies? And lastly, capabilities. Do you have the required tools and competencies? Next slide, please. If you feel daunted by this, don't. The digital transformation is ultimately for everyone's benefit. This has actually been the goal of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas for the industry all this time to ultimately bring financial inclusion to Filipinos. Given the profile of the underserved and unbanked, they could be reached through digital sachet banking and similar services. Ang pagbabangko magiging parang pagbili na lamang ng suka at patis sa mga sari-sari stores. Next slide, please. So why do we say that? Because financial service will be affordable. Patingi-tingi na lamang as needed. It will be convenient because touch points can be delivered right in the neighborhood, if not on their own mobile phone. It will be accessible because real and imagined barriers will be torn down. Wala nang hiya-hiya or takot factor, as what Eugene said a while ago about this fear factor. And lastly, it will be pervasive. Parang viral video or meme na lang. Next slide, please. To make sure this happens, we must be able to fulfill a number of customer-centric imperatives. We should be evidence-based and data-driven. What's good with a digital system is that we are able to account for every click, every second spent in our facilities, and other hard facts to guide us in our decision-making. Wala nang hula-hula if we actually listen to these inputs. We must be education-focused because a big push for financial literacy is required so that new and old clients will easily transition to these new platforms. While Filipinos are digital savvy, a certain level of comprehension is needed to navigate the safety and security aspect of web and app facilities and maximize their potential. Most importantly, we must have empathy filled, or it must be empathy filled. Dapat maging mapagmalasakit. Again, the imperative is to become customer-centric in order to drive adoption. So our clients' concerns should always come first. Next slide, please. Through the foresight of our chairperson, Mrs. Helen Uchenko-D, and of course, our president, Eugene Acevedo, of course, we would want to present to you or share with you the things that we've been doing in weathering this crisis. I'm sure our audience today would be appreciative of being prepared in the face of unexpected situations. Am I right? So the thing now here is that the mobile app of RCBC Online Retail was updated just this January of 2020 to improve its user interface and introduce new features to optimize digital consumer experience. The handheld automated teller machine devices of RCBC, or what we call the ATM Go, meanwhile, were deployed last year to high impact and volume intensive partners such as rural banks, sari-sari stores, drugstores, pawn shops, cooperatives, and microfinance institutions. Lastly, the groundwork for a digital bank and financial super app, Discartech, has been laid and will soon be ready very, very soon. It will host an array of inclusion tools such as skills marketplace, microinsurance, telemedicine, and a lot more. Next slide, please. But we did not stop and rest on what we had prepared. We worked even harder during the crisis and delivered more services to our customers. Another upgrade was made this month on the RCBC mobile app. It is now one of the most comprehensive online banking apps in the country today. We continue to onboard payout partners for our ATM Go service. In the last 2 months, 16 new devices were deployed. 90 more are expected to be operational by next month. We are now in 72 out of 81 provinces in the Philippines, or about 89% coverage of the entire country. So what you are seeing on your screen would be the heat map, where you could see the concentration of all these digital transactions happening around the country. The platform of Discartech has also been modified to serve as a ready disbursement facility for the national government's social amelioration program, even before we officially launch this new mobile app. Next slide, please. With these preparations, RCBC is able to respond to the needs of our clients through these difficult times. Just over the long weekend, transactions coursed through the RCBC ATM Go service breached 2 billion pesos. This was achieved in record time, almost 50% faster than last year's when we reached 2 billion pesos in October 2019. Also, growth data all grew more than double during the ECQ period compared to previous numbers. This was due in part to the quick collaboration of RCBC with rural bank, co-ops, and payment centers in the Damayang Sambayanihan Hatid Ayuda sa Kababayan initiative to provide accessible encashment channels for carded 4-piece or Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino beneficiaries and social amelioration family beneficiaries through ATM Go. Next slide, please. ATM Go was also endorsed by DSWD to its regional field offices as an off-site payment channel for the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program. So as you could see on your screen, these are some of the shots or actual photos taken during the actual payout. So the service ensured continuous delivery of cash aid to beneficiaries despite the limited operation of bank branches and restricted mobility. Majority of transactions facilitated by ATM Go is for those enrolled in the conditional cash transfer of the government. Next slide. 3-digit growths were recorded across key metrics for web and in-app services. New sign-ups for our digital platforms more than doubled in the first quarter of the year, and even more during the ECQ period. This expanding consumer base is the bank's online facilities also boosted transaction data. Next slide, please. As much as 916% increase has been recorded by RCBC as of latest report, a testament to strong digital adoption during the quarantine period. This is not just a picture of a company surviving in the middle of a pandemic, but one that is thriving really well. Next slide, please. All this and more were made possible through RCBC's collaboration with other fintech players. Cooperation between the old guards and the new blood of this industry is today's recipe for success. As you can see on your screen, this is more of an equation of more addition or more a multiplier effect in terms of the collaboration between and amongst legacy bankers and disruptors. Next slide, please. Digital transformation is not only accelerating development, but it is also expanding development to include more Filipinos. Filipinos who remain unbanked and underserved by the constraints of legacy banking. Next slide, please. It may not have been a positive factor, but the COVID-19 crisis became the tipping point for the mass digital adoption of banking customers. This might be the spark for the insurance industry too. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic, like any other crisis, has magnified the deficiencies in all the systems that govern our lives and made urgent the response to these problems. For banking, it is the limitations of in-branch transactions which cause the migration of customers to banks' digital platforms, which are fast, convenient, and safe alternatives. In fact, for RCBC, we are aiming to migrate at least 50% of branch-based over-the-counter transactions to digital. Next slide, please. So growth in digital transactions will be sustained in even beyond this global pandemic. Aversion to physical transactions will remain even after the last person is cured of the disease. The fear of contracting a deadly virus from the use of coins, paper money, or even ATMs and the like linger long after. COVID-19 will make history as the greatest disruptor in modern history across industries, and in fact, of mankind. As for the deficiencies of the insurance industry that might have been revealed in recent months, insurtech players might just have the answer for those. Next slide. Slowly building on top of the success of fintech as disruptors in banking are insurtech or insurance technology players. Similar to how fintech players found their places in the gaps within the banking industry, insurtech players also find opportunities for innovation. Next slide, please. Some of the trends that have been observed in the insurtech industry is the use of artificial intelligence to gauge risk, chatbots for improved customer experience, ultra-customized policies, or on-demand protection, similar to sachet banking and Internet of Things, or IoT, for the harvesting data from GPS, smartwatches, and other devices. I am excited for all of you to see how this can change your industry as much as it has changed ours. Also, I see so many opportunities for us to work together in the future with all this development in sight. Next slide, please. As always, I'd like to bring it back to my personal advocacy to provide financial inclusion to the Filipino masses. As I've said, the digital future is today and the new normal is now. But more and more of people are at risk to be left behind, made even more vulnerable because of the consequences of this pandemic and extended quarantine. The digital transformation, among other things, allow us to empower our countrymen. So let us keep in mind those who are underserved. And with that, thank you so much and good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Lito.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Lito. It's an eye-opener.
Thank you.
Especially
So
the last two slides. We have to move faster.
Yes.
Well, at least we know that our colleagues in the banking industry are ready and willing to help us.
Surely.
So it's really up to the insurance companies to step up to the plate.
Yes, the opportunities is there and we have to collaborate with each other on this.
We got a sprinkling of CEOs and CFOs in our audience, so maybe they have some questions for us. So ladies and gentlemen, the questions, the Q&A is now open. You might want to type in a few questions in the Q&A.
Lito mentioned something earlier about strategy, culture, organization, and capabilities. I think my personal opinion, I think for the insurance industry, a lot has to change on the culture side, because as we've seen in the polls, right? It's still mostly, interestingly, it is still on bank deposit and check payments. But if the last item on the poll, which it is a question on for if you're already employing digital banking, actually 51% said yes, they are. But
Ah,
as to
okay.
what form of digital, maybe, well, we're not sure, right?
Well, that is interesting to note. I mean, looking at the results of the poll question earlier, that practically more than half of the respondents said that they are using traditional means of doing their businesses, right, in terms of financial transactions. So I think this will really change a lot post-COVID or post-lockdown. Because as we all know, more than 50% of branches or branch networks across banks have been closed during the ECQ, and I think what I would like to share with everyone is that once you try digital, it is already habit forming. So once you've tried it, you won't go back to the previous ways of doing your traditional method of doing your thing, right? So, but I think what is really imperative here would be, the understanding of digital transformation. As you perfectly put it, it is not just about technology or processes. Digital transformation is about mindset, about culture, about people. So because at the end of the day, those technologies or those platforms, those processes are practically developed by people, right? So if you have the right mindset, if you have the organization and the culture to really make things happen and to change the way you do things for the better, then I think you're on the right track.
Yes.
Yes, Lito, that's true. But another hurdle that we probably have is in the regulatory side. The Insurance
Okay.
Commission itself would have to step up to the plate. We'll have to convince them to be more adaptive to these changes. Actually,
Well,
that's a comment from one of our participants.
yes, I think Commissioner Dennis Puna is one of the, I mean, because he's one of those regulators. I mean, together with BSP, with SEC, and even with PDIC, and all the other government entities. We had this particular engagement with them on how to further accelerate digitalization across industries, and that will definitely include insurance, insurance industry as a because it practically covers financial services. So I think what is also imperative here is the fact that the government, through BSP, together with about 49 government agencies, signed what we call the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion, and Insurance Commission is one of those signatories, wherein they are now committed to accelerate the push for inclusive digital finance. And of course, when we talk of financial inclusion, it does not only start and end with payments. So it would cover payments, lending, savings, insurance, and investments, among other things. So of course, insurance, and of course, Philippines is one of the countries in Southeast Asia that would have the least in terms of insurance penetration rate, right? So I think even Commissioner Dennis Puna, in one of his messages or programs, is on how to make that 10x or 20x in terms of output for the insurance industry, because I think that has been the thrust of the government moving forward.
Thank you, Lito. Well, I was looking at the questions that are coming in, and there is a common thread amongst it. And basically what it says is that if we want the insurance industry to embrace fintech or this new way of banking, we'd have to get rid or address the fear factor. So how do you think you could help us with that? Maybe it's a distrust of how things are done online. How
Well, I
safe
think, yeah, just one last on that one thing. we have to remember that in all the things that we do, trust is the main commodity of our business. Our main commodity is trust, right? So trust must always be, in everything that we do. And of course, we understand the fears of those people who would want to venture into digital because of those news about cyber hacking, cyber attacks. I mean, these cyber threats, etc. And for them, news about their money being stolen online, etc. And a lot of things, right? So, given the fact that technology is on a fast-paced mode as well, uh, fraud or cyber attack are also on a high gear as well. So that's why banks and other financial institutions, or practically all the other companies across industries, would also be putting so much investments on cybersecurity, because again, we have to ensure that trust is there to make everyone, I mean, the public in general, to be able to adapt to digitalization.
So do you think we can reassure our clients that this is being addressed and taken care of?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Mitch, I
Yes.
think one of our participants even said maybe this is an opportunity for insurance, because where there are risks, insurance can come in. So looking at
That's right.
cyber insurance
Good
as
point.
new products.
Yes, I guess they know that,
Yeah.
right? And we're going to be prepared for that. Oh,
Can I just
there's
add
a good
something?
question here.
And I think Manny wants to add something to that. Manny?
Yeah, Manny.
Yeah, I don't know if Mitch, I don't know if part of the fear is the investment required, but definitely, I think that if you look at what I had shown in terms of, say, connecting yourself to a bank's bills payment platform or getting customers to pay you, there's hardly any investment. In fact, I think it's nil, no, in terms of hardware and software. It's really just internal processes, because you're starting to receive payments and you were probably in the past so used to doing things like making records of the checks of the entity that came in. Now it's going to be electronic. So that's a matter of procedure. It's not a matter of a big capital expenditure. So that's something I thought I should mention in relation to what was being said about fear factor, because that plays into it. In fact, Eugene was mentioned earlier. No? I mean, cost cutting is going to be a big thing for us in 2020. So I thought that was important to say.
Maybe
I'm sure
if I
that's
can
good
add.
news.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
Eugene.
Yeah, frankly, the reason why we're going through this exercise and spending money is because if we don't do it at some point in the future, we will just perish. And I think every CEO has to understand that this is an existential question. This is not, oh, I'd like to do this, it would be nice. No, it's not about nice, it's about must. We do this or we, at some point, will just simply not exist. Now, the good thing about this is while you're doing it, while you're fixing all these things, your customers will love it, your employees will love it, and you will cut costs. Maybe the only other thing I'd like to add is for those who are concerned about fraud, I tell you, we spend hundreds of millions a year on that alone. We pay the best outsourced providers in the world. We're not picking local talent, we're picking global talent because we owe it to our customers. But you know what? You know what the weakest point is? People being fooled. People being fooled, giving all their credentials, user ID, password, etc. I mean, what can you do? We can spend hundreds of millions and people are still fooled. So to solve that, we have been spending a lot of money making sure that there's education. So you know how you do that. Keep educating people, educating, and we will never stop until everybody becomes familiar with how it should be done. And
Right.
lately, some fraudsters were caught by by the police. Apparently, it was led by a 19-year-old tech student who was teaching everybody else how to steal money from everyone. And guess what? After that happened, the incidence of phishing or stealing or this cottage industry cyber fraud has come down significantly. So it's a little bit of many things, but yeah, you get into this, you will have to invest. But trust me, you have to, because otherwise you simply will not exist.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you very much. Oh, there's a question here on fees. In other countries, sending funds interbank are free online.
It's free now.
Oh, it
We're
is
free now.
He says that there's a fee of around 50 pesos per transaction.
Okay. If I can take that.
Yeah, sige, ikaw, Manny.
Sure. All right. I had mentioned that one of the best things why I call them better EFT services is because a lot has been standardized. And when I say a lot has been standardized, what really matters there is that I'm confident that if I pay Mitch today, I send him a transfer from the convenience of my mobile. One, he'll get it in full. Two, he'll get it today. Okay, so it's just as good as giving him cash, except I don't have to see Mitch. It wasn't the case before. There were EFT services before, but it was every bank for himself. I'll credit it 2 days later. I'll deduct 15 pesos. I'll deduct 50 pesos. Okay, now it's standard. So everyone should be confident about that. Okay, there's only one thing, okay, which the BSP did not standardize, did not ask us to standardize. And that is the fees we charge the one sending. All right, so different banks have different charges per transaction. So your observation is correct. There is a fee. Now, Eugene had mentioned that's free for now. It is because it's part of the Bayanihan, participation in the Bayanihan. No? He was one. But even when that comes out, just to give you an idea, if you use the peso transaction electronically with us, that's 10 pesos. All right. How much does it cost to cut a check? How much does it cost for you to get the check in the first place? You pay for the checkbook, right? And then you spend on processing and all that. You expose people to risk. Isn't that worth 10 pesos? I mean, I think it is. No? Now, I think we're one of the most, one of the better, more competitively priced banks when it comes to that. And you'll find there are different pricings out there. So I would advise you shop around. There are fees involved, but I think the fees are reasonable. You just have to find the right one. That's it.
I think this is an eye-opener for one of the major challenges of insurance companies now, and that's collection of premium. And they are not having so much of a problem collecting from intermediaries like brokers who have corporate accounts. I think the concern now is to collect from agencies, individual agents who have various small accounts with them. So I think the information that we got today on that is an eye-opener for companies that actually they can collect if only they're able to ask their agents to accept that and practice and enroll in cash wallets.
Whether, yeah, agree, kids. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
There's one here, Francis. With the scale of balance between operations and business tipped in favor of business, how can we recognize these opportunities in maximizing business while providing the best possible service to our customers?
Okay, so the premise there is that the scales have tipped in favor of business.
Business,
rather
yes.
than operations.
Yep. That's what it looks like.
I would. Okay. I would want to understand why that's the sentiment. We like to think that we keep a balance in between. In the banking industry, I recall there was an analogy used by one of my former CEOs he said that business and operations are two wings of the plane. If one is shorter than the other, the plane won't take off. If one is gone, all the more it won't take off. So you've got to balance that. I don't really see that there's a a swing toward the business side as a result of the pandemic. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. There's another question here, Manny. They would like to find out how financial advisors or the agents are going to transact, especially for putting in new premiums in banks when we close big cases like a single premium payment of 20 million or a regular premium payment of 1 to 2 million when the current maximum amount online is only 50,000.
Okay. The maximum amount online is 50,000 for InstaPay, but PesoNet, sky's the limit. Just for your information, the largest single PesoNet transaction in 2019 was 3 billion pesos. 3 billion pesos. So you just have to choose the proper EFT service. If you choose PesoNet, then
yes,
you should be
I discussed that with Manny when we were talking about this webinar, and for payments and collections from insurance brokers where there are a lot of corporate accounts, some companies, as Manny suggested, will have to use the PesoNet route. Now for the individual agencies, then it will be the InstaPay route.
So I guess it depends on the size.
yes, that's right. Exactly.
Okay. There's another question here. Does corporate online banking systems allow the company to pay via cash cards or pay Maya or GCash accounts?
Okay, when you say pay, I'm assuming what you mean is that to receive payment from a corporate. So the answer is, yeah. The answer is yes. We do have, although I would not use, I will not specifically talk about the brand PayMaya or GCash. I will talk about a class of product called the wallet card, okay, which is really the card version of a prepaid telephone or prepaid cellular line. So you load it with cash. And when it's loaded with cash, you can swipe it, you can withdraw from an ATM. So there's no account that's open. It's just a balance that is kept in the bank that the card controls. The answer is yes. We have a lot of payroll customers, for example, RCBC, who choose to pay their employees into a cash card instead. Now, why would that be the case? One would be their contractuals, okay? So you don't want to have to open an account and close an account again, open an account again for contractuals, because there are a lot of requirements that go into opening an account, KYC, etc. So that's more enough. The other thing is turnover is high. There are some BPOs where turnover rates are really, really fast. So again, same problem. You don't want to have to keep opening and closing accounts. So if you give this to them instead, then that makes a lot more sense. So we've seen it done for BPOs, for agents, for med reps, for contractual construction employees, etc. Okay, so that's, yeah.
Thanks, Manny. Another question here. A very specific question, as a matter of fact. There are many people taking advantage of this pandemic. Many banks are warning their customers about scammers. So how can the public guard against these scammers? Any tips?
Okay, I think in general, because many people are forced to go electronic and they're not used to it. Okay, they tend to be easily fooled. There's just two things I will say about this. No? First is the bank will never ask you to send them credential information. So if someone's coming to you and saying, "Oh, can you please reset your account access by keying in your ID and password online," they send you an email that requests for it. for all intents and purposes, that's probably not us. So if I were you, I would call my branch manager and report it and ask, are you really going through this exercise right now? The second is, whenever you can, and this is just not for banks, whenever you can avail of multi-factor authentication or 2FA, do so, because that has proven to be one of the most effective countermeasures against identity theft and fraud. When the bank will send you a one-time password by SMS or by Viber or by email, I would cooperate myself with those two things. And I think I have a reasonably good chance, even though I'm a newbie or a greenhorn at electronic banking, at keeping myself free from fraud.
Okay. Okay, here's another question. Will these EFT products work for payments that we have to make overseas, as most of the reinsurers of our member companies are overseas?
Okay. No, the answer is no. These are really intended for peso transfers, interbank peso transfers in the Philippines. For payments to be made abroad, you would have to use the outward remittance products of banks that go through SWIFT. So that would be the proper solution to make international payments.
Okay, thanks, Manny. Kit, you might have other questions.
Actually, I have a question. This is a problem that's normally encountered by many insurance companies when they do electronic banking, and that is when they accept payments from their clients, and normally the details of the policy to be paid is not properly indicated, and there are a lot of instances where the payments float, and the insurance companies have a difficult time tracing it. So what can you say about that, man?
Well, this is what I mentioned earlier in terms of it's not a big investment to go digital when you talk about receiving payments, but you do have to change your internal processes. Now, the most important thing there is to make sure that there is a procedure at the paying end, at the front end of the customer, that collects that data. And one of the options I showed you, which was the enroll in a bank's e-banking platforms, in effect, ensures that that will end. So that if a customer wants to pay, whether it's over the counter or online, all right, if he wants to pay pay your company, pay a premium, then the teller or the form that he will be filling up, if it's paper, needs to be included, all right? And furthermore, I was explaining to Francis the first time we talked that if you have an internal process for numbering your accounts such that it follows a certain algorithm and it can be validated as a valid number in the series of that algorithm, then the bank can institute that as well. So you're sure that even the customer is not making a mistake, okay? So the answer to the question really is that one, in the front end, first you have to have a solid process for collecting that. Two, you have to make sure your bank transmits that as part of the information. And typically a bank like us would have a electronic report for all the collections that has all of that data alongside each of the payments, so that you never have a problem with a floating amount.
That's very important. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Manny, we are at 3:33 and we know we're supposed to end at 3:30, but the questions are coming in thick and fast. So do you still have a few minutes to answer more questions, or?
Yeah, well, I could probably take at most 3 more, because I'll
all right. Okay, what kind of digital support can our OFWs expect from the banks during the new normal, considering they are one of the most affected markets in this pandemic?
Okay, what I've seen, and I don't know if Lito is still around, but we had connected, for instance, to our Send Cash product in online banking. to payout partners who would be the likes of, let's say, Cebuana Liwalier and Liwalier, who else, you know, the pawn shops, so that
Uh-oh, we froze.
Manny froze.
We're having connectivity problems here. Sorry, folks. We'll get back to you on the answers to that. Francis, you want to say anything?
Mr. Mr. Acevedo, would you like to say something? Okay. I think we lost Manny already. Anyway, well, I guess, Mitch, we can let's just re-engage with Manny later on if we're not able to get him back right away. So in the meantime, well, I guess I just like to maybe we can end it already here.
Okay.
I think,
So thank you
Sir,
everybody for joining us once again, and we'll try to get back to you on the unanswered questions.
Yeah.
Ito, would you want to
Yeah.
say anything?
Well,
Yeah,
just also thank everyone. So this is a record attendance
Yes,
for
it
our
is.
5 webinars, and really want to thank PIRA and IIAP also for partnering with us. We were just talking earlier and we were saying, well, this is the end of season 1. Is there going to be a season 2? Maybe the answer is abangan.
Abangan ang susunod na kabanata.
Yes. So thank you everyone again
But
for all
before we
your
do
support.
let our guest speakers go, we'd like to thank them. Big thank
Yes.
you from PIRA, from IIAP, and from CPI. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights. Mr. Acevedo, we'd
Thank
like
you,
to
Mr.
see you in
Acevedo.
one of our future webinars again, if that's possible.
Sure, thank you.
Thank
Manny.
you.
Manny's
Yes,
back.
you
I
learned
guess,
a
sorry,
lot.
sorry, cut. Sorry about that.
Anyway,
I think I
we,
think that's my phone telling me time to go.
Okay. Manny will badger you for the questions that were unanswered, but we don't have to do that now.
Sure.
We'll just get back to our viewers later on. Meanwhile,
Well,
we'd like to thank
happy to
you
do that.
again for joining us. Thank you very much, Manny, Mr. Acevedo.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well,
Most welcome.
Lito had to leave earlier because he has another meeting.
I
So thank Lito for us as well.
okay. So
Will do, definitely.
And we're
Definitely.
looking forward to a
Again,
collaboration between our 2 industries, insurance and
Of
banking. I
course.
mean, we're cousins, actually siblings.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Good-looking cousins, huh? Okay.
okay.
So Ito,
Yes, again, thank you so much to our team from RCBC. Thank you, Mr. Acevedo, Manny, and Lito. We learned a lot.
Most welcome, Ito.
In fact, many
All right,
ideas.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay, great.
and
Let us
for the
know if we can help you in any way.
Sorry. For the participants,
For sure.
there is one last survey question. Please don't forget to answer that so we know how to serve you better in the future.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you very much as well.
Thank you
All right,
very
see you again
much.
soon,
Thank you.
guys. Good night. Have a
Bye.
good
See
evening.
you.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. A lot of people are writing in to thank you. Well, we should thank you for joining us, and don't forget to join us for future webinars. As Ito mentioned, abangan ang susunod na kabanata. All right.
Season 2 ba yan? Season 2?
Season
Mitch.
2. Season 2. Baka may 3, 4, 5 pa.
Oh, sana.
All right. So thank you. Thanks, Ito.
Thank
Hey,
you
Carl,
also.
behind the scenes, maraming salamat. Oh, look at
Oh,
this.
and Shell also.
Hey, look at this poll results. I can't believe this. Was this webinar helpful for your business? With
Yeah.
235 respondents, 100% said yes.
That's great.
Hey, nakakataba ng puso.
Correct.
Salamat,
Tama.
salamat.
Yes. And also thank you to Shell, who's on our Facebook side.
Hey, thank you,
She was
Shell.
yeah.
Okay, bye. See you guys.
Bye.